So how do you see the impacts of climate change in the Champagne region?
It's very easy to see in Champagne, in fact. If you look carefully, you don't have to be really old to notice that. In the last 30 years, we peaked 18 days earlier than 30 years ago. If you look carefully, we peaked in August in 2003, in 2007, 11, 17, 18. The last time was in 1893. So you see there's definitely an acceleration. It's obvious. And if you look at the grapes, at juices, at the wines, you can see some differences too. First one is about alcohol. We have a rise of about 1% natural alcohol in the past 30 years. At the same time, we lost about 1 gram per liter of total acidity. And because of carbon dioxide in the air, the yields are getting bigger, which is not such bad news for people in Champagne.
Yeah.
So you see quite a few big changes.
It's very visible. Can you highlight some of the adaptation strategies that you have developed in the vineyard to respond to climate impacts?
In fact, I will answer your question about adaptation, but the first thing is really about mitigation.
Okay.
Because at that point, adaptation is possible. And I'm not worried at all for the next 30, 50 years to come. But then if you look for a longer time, it could be a real problem if we do nothing. So going back to adaptation, we are very lucky in Champagne to get what we call chalk. This is our white soil, because this chalk is working like a sponge and like a radiator. So it will get the water in and out. It will get the temperature in and out. And it's really working very well for regulation. Even if it's very dry in Champagne for 3 months, vineyards are not suffering at all. If it rains for 3 months, vineyards are not suffering at all. So this is the main tool, chalk, and it's there. But then after, for us, the big adaptation is about keeping freshness. So as I told you, we have more sugar, we have less acid, and Champagne is quite an acidic wine.
Yes.
So what we have to do is to work in the vineyard to get grapes with more acid, and then in the cellar too, because we can do things about acidity in the cellar too. In the vineyards, very easy. Very easy, I mean. Yeah. I'm saying that, but it's not easy at all. The solutions are not that difficult to understand, but they are quite difficult to manage.
Okay. Because what we're talking about, if you're getting less acidity, higher alcohol, it's really a different, you're experience style change. Less freshness or more body or
You're
texture.
right.
And how does that feed into the identity of your brand and the regularity of non-vintage champagne, for example?
At that point, it's really not a problem, because in fact, if you think about Champagne 50 years ago, acidity was quite a problem, and getting ripe grapes was quite a problem. Yeah. So now we are getting ripe, safe grape, and the acidity is down, but it's still very high. It's still very high. The pH of our wines are still around 3, so it's still very acidic. But it's moving up, and we have to be careful, because if it moves too fast, it can be a problem.
This is what I was going to say, is the IPCC and the emissions trajectory that we're on shows that it's going up, and the temperatures will keep going up.
Yes.
Because we're not changing our behaviour. How does that fit into your planning and strategy, because you are a long-term business?
That's a main problem. The long-term strategy is definitely about mitigation. The medium-term strategy is about adaptation. And if you think about adaptation, we can work the soil. If you work the soil, you will get more acid wine. Yes. You can change your rootstock. get some later rootstock, so pick a little bit later in September in cooler day. You can pick very early in the morning or during night to get fresh grapes. You can change the density of the vineyard. In Champagne now it's very narrow, very high density. You can go to a large vineyard and you know that if you do that you will get more acid in the grapes. So there's quite a few tools we can use. And of course we can think about old varieties or new varieties. Old varieties because in Champagne you have what you call the forgotten varieties.
Yes.
And some of them are very interesting, like Petit Meunier or Arban, because they are very fresh. So we can plant more and we can move to other varieties that can give freshness too.
If you do that, are you going to experience a shift in style if it becomes a permanent thing? And I'm interested because people who like Bollinger know what it tastes like. You know, they like it because of what it is.
So you should come. We planted some Arban and some Petit Meunier, and we have some good results with that. So you should come and try and taste in Bollinger. No, you're right. It's about style again, and style is not only one thing. So you can move things. We use a lot of reserve wine. We have a lot of different way, even in the cellar too, to preserve this freshness. So for the, let's say, 20, 30 years to come, it's not really worrying. But then after, you have to be very careful.
Do you think that what is happening is that the wines are becoming slightly more complex? And it maybe, there is a sort of more texture, but the public actually like it.
Yeah.
It is very, very good wine.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's a slight positive.
It's awful to say so, but for Champagne, right now, until now, and I'm not saying it's going to be the same in the future, but until now, it's quite good news. We are getting riper grapes. The acidity is still very high, and very regular harvest. If you look in the past, sometimes you were producing 2 tons per hectare, and next year 12 tons per hectare, and then 2 tons, and then big frost, and now all that is quite over. So for us, for Champagne, at that point, it's not such bad news.
Okay. Are you looking at any particular interventions to combat hail or frost? Because they seem to be an issue that recurs.
Yeah, no, you're right. That's one of the points for Bollinger. We decided a long time ago, 15 years ago, to do nothing against frost. Because we know that if you want to do something, you will use a lot of energy coming from fossil energy, carbon energy. It's the only way to protect against frost at that time in Champagne is to burn fuel and to get the vineyard warm. But it's really a lot energy and it's not really interesting for a carbon footprint. And we do nothing against hail either.
Hail.
No.
Consumers seem to be growing more concerned about climate change. How do you communicate what you are doing to your customers who are starting to ask questions about carbon footprint, sustainability, all these kinds of things?
We were Bollinger, it's not only about carbon footprint, it's more or less about environment, and carbon footprint is part of it. But we were the first house to get the certification high environmental value. We were the first house in Champagne to get the certification sustainable viticulture in Champagne. We were one of the first houses to make our carbon footprint in 2010 and then in 2015, showing a decrease of 18% per bottle of our print. So we are doing things, but it's not easy to communicate because unfortunately many people, when you say you're doing that, they are saying, why don't you do that? So we stopped herbicides 5 years ago. We work all the soils. We use very, very low amount of fungicides too. We reduced it by 35% the use of fungicides.
Okay.
So we are saving energy, using less intrants, and then maybe we are not very good at communicating like.
Well, I think one of the important things is talking about it.
Yeah.
I think Champagne has come a long way in talking about climate change.
Yeah, for Champagne, I think Champagne was one of the first regions in the world. The first carbon footprint of Champagne was in 2003. So at that time, really nobody talked about that, about climate change and global warming. They did a global carbon footprint in 2013, and they did one last year, and we are really going down. And for all Champagne, which is really really good. And I think our objective for Champagne is what we call factor 4, is to reduce by 4,
Yes.
divide by 4,
Yeah.
all the emissions of greenhouse gases in 2050. And at that point, we are minus 25%. So we have still minus 50% to reach, but we are on a good way. Yeah.
Okay. I think that's it.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
You.